community show. And these awards were judged by David Curtis, who many of you may know is a well-known landscape painter from Gloucester. He's a member of the Boston Guild. David, a number of years ago, did a landscape demo for us. And anyway, he's just a wonderful artist. And I'll be reading his comments as I pass out the awards. So I'm going to start. We have 4 honorable mentions. And the first one goes to Dale Bonner for her New England Salt Marsh. If you have any of these that are over on the table, you can see which piece of work on. And the comments that David made for Dale on her piece was, the well-designed foreground leads to the middle ground of this landscape, with the overall warm color rhythms creating a unity in composition. Congratulations, Dale. Our next honorable mention goes to Cynthia DeMure. Cynthia, yours is for your Lakeview in July watercolor, and the judge said, the spotting of the bright red color is in the right location. Even though the abstracted shapes and colors create a pure design, it still has a verbal quality telling a story. So he thought there was a story there. Congratulations. Our third honorable mention goes to Judy Noonan for Shady Lane number 2. The judge says about this piece, the landscape has a great sense of focus, sharp to soft. The sharp edges of the trees in the foreground help to create depth, and a pleasing color suggests the light of dawn. Congratulations, Judy. Our 4th honorable mention goes to Celia Judd. Is she here? Okay, the judge writes for Celia's piece, which is called Squam Birches. The oneness of color value, creating a harmony of tone, helps bring the pleasing notes of autumn to life. So that's very nice. I'll take that for her. Okay, moving on to our 3rd place. We have Sharon Cohen for her Kayaks Resting at Wild Harbor. And the judge writes, this painting has a great sense of focus from the foreground to the background. The artist illustrates variety within unity, taking into account color, value, and design. Congratulations, Sharon. Second place goes to Elizabeth Fawcett for her painting. Elizabeth is not able to be here tonight. She wishes she could, but she was not able to. The judge mentioned on her piece, he said, lost, found, and edges are used to create chiaroscuro of light and shade on the subtle form of this flower. The contoured edge is beautifully varied. So I will give that to Elizabeth. And finally, our 1st place winner goes to Michelle Madeline for her Tree Shadows on Hill number 2, Medfield. And the judge says, the overall bigness of the composition holds the viewer's attention with the subtlety of light and shade on this landscape. Great values. Congratulations, Michelle. Okay, thank you. And as Bobby mentioned, the show will be at the Community Center for another 6 months, so go and see it. It's a beautiful show.
So it is my honor and privilege to introduce our artist tonight, Sally Metting. I'm so happy that she has agreed to demo for us. Sally, if you don't know Sally, you'll hear her just in a minute. She's from another country. She is from the UK.
From Mars, yeah.
Not from Mars, from the UK. And she studied in Germany, and she got her PhD in immunology. Even though she told me that she really wanted to go into art, but her family decided that she needed something else. So, but she and her husband moved to the U.S. in 1990, first to California, where their son was born, and they stayed there for 10 years in Northern California, and then to Dallas, Texas for another 10 years. And then finally, in 2010, we were lucky enough to get her up in the Boston area, and she joined the WSA shortly after that. And we were so thrilled that she volunteered right away to manage our website, and she did that for many years, and we're very grateful that she did that. She has since retired that now, and Nancy, who's here, Travis is right over there, is now doing our website. But Sally did that for a long time. So she, as I said, she got her PhD in Germany. She didn't really start painting or getting into art until she moved to the U.S. And in California, she did a lot of drawing. And then when she was in Texas, she was really introduced to abstraction. That's where she started working with abstraction. And she took lots of workshops and classes and whatever, but she never got that formal training, so she's really feels like she's very much self-taught. And now she's teaching at a number of places, at the Danforth Museum, at Needham High School and Needham Senior Center, and at the Post Road Art Center in Marlboro, and at her own studio. So you can find out about her classes by going to her website, sallymetting.com. And now, without further ado, Sally Metting. Thanks.
Thank you. You make me sound like I've traveled all the world, but I haven't. So today I'm going to do two different things. I'm going to be swapping from one to the other. I'm going to do a realistic painting. It's going to be a sunflower, because I actually love sunflowers. And then I'm going to do it abstractly. But as Bobby said, I learned abstraction first, so I feel more comfortable with the abstraction than I do with realism, but I'm going to do them side by side. And I just want to thank you all for coming out on such a beautiful evening, and for Yale and Bobby and everybody that helped set this lovely system up tonight. It's fabulous. This is awesome. Wow, really impressed. So I'm going to go through my process, and I don't know how much you can see. You probably can't see much of my drawing here. It can move it across a little bit. But all you can see are these little blobs of color, and those are masking fluid. And I'm using that to just protect my paper, because I want to slot color all over it, and this will protect the areas, and then I can rub it off afterwards, and I'll have beautiful whites. So the things that I use are these two combinations of things. This one is a mask from Richardson, and this is drawing gum from PBO. This one is lovely flesh pink, and this one is a really deep bluish color. But when you mix the two together, you get a somewhat light to mid-tone grey, which I find much less offensive, and this one I can barely see on the paper, which reminds me I now need to wear glasses, so yeah, probably dirty. So the first thing I did was actually draw it, and I didn't trace any of these. I do actually like drawing. So what I do is I take my photo, and this is what we're going to be painting, and you may be able to see a grid over the top. And I then just mark off a grid on the edge of the paper. You might not be able to see those marks, they're underneath the tape. And then just enlarge, so taking each shape and working my way around so I get the proportions right. And in fact, this is a way you can change the proportions, so they don't have to be these sizes. You can elongate, stretch by doing it by this method. So the drawing skills I did learn in California. And then in Texas particularly, my teacher was Jane Jones, and she really taught me a lot about design, and in fact she had taken from Joe Taylor, whose book I use as my Bible, if you like, and I have a copy of it here. Watercolor Wisdom. She's actually a Dolphin Fellow of the AWS, and she is very much design-based. Wonderful approach. I love her thinking about composition and her good shape, but I'll talk about that in a sec. And then this book too, I learned a lot from Nita Leland. I took several workshops from her. I ended up taking, I don't know, 20 workshops in Texas. There was just a wonderful place to do that. And I got to know her quite well, and she even published one of my pictures. It's that one over there, but so that one's in the book if you're interested. I actually tagged a little page. So yes, Nita's a fabulous person. If you ever get the opportunity, she really does know color extremely well and has probably about 5 books out. So I did my drawing, I did my masking, and masking I use a scabby old brush. You can see all the paints come off it, and then I will cover that firstly in soap. I like to use a brush cleaner, and I will soap it up as if it's, make a lather, so that you protect your brush from the masking, and then you put on your masking to protect the paper from the watercolor which you're going to put on it. So you protect. And so you can come and take a look which ones I use, and then that's me putting it into a little droppy bottle. It takes a few minutes to dry. I didn't want us to have to wait, so I thought we would jump straight in and start putting on my first layer of what I do. So I do think about the design, and I had put this not smack in the middle. I was trying to think that this space, oh, you can't see it so well on there, but let's look at the photo for a GIF. I actually have a bit more space at the bottom here, so this space is different from that, and these distances are different. I start thinking also then about color, which is going to dominate, but the first thing I did was to really think about the value. Value is more important than color, although I'd rather it wasn't, but because I love color, but color really is secondary. So what I do first, before I even start, is I usually look at it in black and white. And this really helps me hone in on the shapes. And Joe Taylor taught me that this is the good shape, and it has to be obliquely placed on the paper. This is supposedly the best. I mean, it's guidelines, of course. Rules are meant to be broken. And it has interlocking edges. It is longer than it is wide, and it should touch at least 3 sides of the paper. So that's what Joe Taylor taught me as being her good shape, and it fits for anything. And in fact, here is, I don't know how well you'll be able to, maybe I can zoom you in. So here is her good shape. So you can imagine so there are some spaces around the edges. And then each of these are different value schemes. And if you look at this one follows the same pattern really as this one. I guess you could see it in more than one way. So this one is a piece of darker value and lighter value. And this is the light piece, and then you can add all of these up, and this becomes the darker piece. Even though they're not completely connected as they are in this picture, it still really reads as a piece of lighter in darker. And then of course you can do it the opposite way round, which is what I'm going to be doing, but I'll show you that in a minute when we come to do the abstract. So I'm going to be swapping the value format as well as all the colors. But there are all these 6 formats. They actually follow all the paintings that are out there. Every painting, whether it's a Picasso or a Van Gogh, what have you, they all generally fall into these 6 categories. And I have never learned that from any other artist. So I've been using this, and it's been making my paintings much, much more successful, just knowing that this is what makes a painting read across a room. And you can paint things absolutely technically perfectly, but if it doesn't read across the room in black and white, it's not going to get into show, it's not going to be an eye catcher. So I learned that fairly early on, that was particularly important. So let's get started with getting some wet in a brush. So I've got myself a fairly large brush here. This is a 1.5 inch. I should have put my 2 inch, but I'm going to literally wet my paper with this, and sometimes I just spray it, other times I'm doing this, and either way works. I just don't want to move too much of the gelatin sizing on this 140-pound Arches watercolor paper, which is my fave. And I've tried lots of others, but I always come back to this one. And as it, my chair's got a bump in it. It's pretty warm in, well, maybe it's not too bad, but it's dry in here because of the air conditioning, so it's going to probably dry faster than I want. And I'm working on a 15-degree slope because I want the colors to flow a little bit, at least for putting on the water. I'm hoping I haven't really missed too much. So while that's soaking in, I can talk about what colors am I going to work with. So next I move to my color wheel. And this is my color wheel, and I'm going to be using a color scheme that Jane Jones kind of put together herself. So let me back up a sec. It's based on Johannes Itten's color Star. And it's nothing unusual. These are tints getting lighter here, and these are tones or shades, depending on if you're England or American. We say tones in England, you say values here. But shades is what they're muddling up now. Shades are when you mix it with black. Tones are when you mix it with grey, although that can be considered your value scale too. So I have lots of these little overlays which have got the spaces, and pretty much what I say is I'm going to dial up what I'm wanting. So I decided that in this piece I wanted it to be there. So I usually have a little sticker, which I've now mushed, but hopefully, and then these are the only colors that I'm going to be using in the whole painting, nothing else. So it's a limited palette. You could see this as a triad, or almost triad, and then in a split complement. So it's kind of like a combo is what I call this one. And she just called it a perfect, and I just got used to using it. So this is starting to work now. So let's bring in my picture. Where's it going? There it is. So I'm going to have this on the side, so I'm always going to be referring to it. But I also need to think about what my mother color is going to be, the dominant color. I'm always going to be thinking about contrasts. So that's what I really liked about this. This was a picture that I took at the Post Road Art Centre. This is about 12 feet tall. There's a lamppost that's obscured behind here. But it was wonderful in terms of shape. It is a little breasty though, so I truncated it here a little bit because I wasn't quite happy with that. So let's get some color in. Scooch up a bit. So I'm going to put in some warm yellows and some cool yellows. So I'm going to bring it over so that you can see. This is my warm yellow, and then I've got cool yellows. Perhaps I'll start with the cool yellow first. And I use a Frank Webb palette. I had one for about 20 years, and I just recently threw it out because the plastic finally gave way. This is probably a year old now. So I'm looking at my picture, and I'm looking to see, oops, see, it's already drying. I'll spritz it even more. I talk too much, sorry. Oops. Okay. So I'm going to start looking at my picture, and I'm going to put my lights, my lightest yellows, which are kind of along the edges, and I'm not staying inside my lines. I don't mind if it runs around a little bit. All adds to the effect. Now I know yellow is the lightest color on the color wheel, which is why I pretty much have the color wheel always that way up. Don't know why I didn't then, but I didn't. So I'm just going to get some of my lights. I know that the sun is coming from this side, so I've got that going on in my head. And my phone's ringing too, so I'll just ignore that. So anywhere that I'm seeing fairly bright colors, randomly adding them, so the yellow is going to glow through. So I like this glow that's happening, that's coming through this leaf. So I'm just putting in some dobs of that. I'm seeing that there's some reflected light coming underneath. See, I'm not the only one who has phone problems. Okay, so I'm going to move that. I want it to be a little bit flatter now. I'm finding that it is puddling a little too much. So this is how you can control it a little bit. Either you go thicker with your consistency, or you go flatter, and then it's just going to migrate out rather than running down the page. Sometimes running down the page is very lovely, especially if it's a sort of raining kind of picture, something where you've got a cascade going on, like the one which you can't see in the dark, but I think we get the point. So now I'm going to move to my warm yellow. This is Indian yellow, M gram, not the best color to travel with. M gram are really juicy colors. So now I'm really going to pop some color in and let the colors do their thing. This chair is really funny. Okay, so I think I need a few more of the cooler yellows down here. So I'm just going to swap brushes for a sec. Okay. Seeing some yellows down there. Okay. So I swap to a 16 round for doing that little bit just now. Oh, that's the wrong color, so I'll keep that one. I'm going to get a green in there. And if I get some in an area where I'm like, no, that's my lighter area. Where's my value study? Got to look at that too. So everything kind of needs to be on the foil with me. And of course, where did it go? My value study. Well, we'll manage without it for a sec. That's the one for the abstract. Well, remember this is the lighter area. So I'm sorry I don't have that visual anymore. It's gone walkies. So I'm going to drop in a little bit more concentrated color now. So this already is looking fairly light, but I'm wanting to really get some juice. So that means thicker paint, and you have to really homogenize it because otherwise you're going to get lumps. So I'm going to put some of those definitely. Oh, see, it's starting to get dry. It's not migrating enough. I want soft, lovely soft edges to begin with. So I'll get some of these suggestions going on here. And of course this paper is going to take quite a while to dry, and I wouldn't be able to dry it fast enough for you to see the next step if I was to work on this. So I've got one that's already dried, so you're going to be in good shape. All right, so got the oranges going on. Oh, it's yellow orange. It's a warm yellow, but it does read more orange. Although up there, it's looking pretty yellow. If I don't know if I hold it up, can you see? It's really quite orange.
Yeah.
So it's very warm, but the TV is clearly taking out some of the reds. And I've got some drippy things happening, but you know what? I kind of like it. So I'm going to let that be. And now I know that my center of my flower is browner, so I'm going to move to burnt sienna, which is a neutralized yellow or yellow-orange or orange, depending on how you see it. So I'm going to add a little bit of those colors. And you won't be able to see from your position, but the spirals that the seeds form are beautiful. I really like that. So I'm going to try and capture some of that. I think I'm going to go to my round brush now because I can be a little more deliberate with the colors. So that's the only exception for me moving outside my color wheel here. So on here is my yellow and my yellow-orange, but burnt sienna is kind of like the exception to the rule, if you like. So I'm going to leave the bounce light there. I'm going to get most of the colors down in here. And I'm thinking about the directionality now of these seeds. And I'm not going to paint every seed. That would be too much for me. But certainly doable. So it seems like it's all out of control at the moment. So let's get a little bit. I'm going to put a tiny bit of red into it as well, just because I've got that here, so I'm allowed to add that. So I'm going to pop some of those in there and let those juicily mingle. Why not? And I might even do a little bit of spatter. Just have to be careful that I don't get it everywhere else. And if you do, you pot. Or you just leave them. So I'm okay with having a few spots. It's okay to have your paint lines showing through. I don't mind a few spots that aren't meant to be where they're not meant to be. So this one, the paper is starting to ripple a little bit now. And I'm going to put this away to dry and finish it on another occasion. And I've got the same thing already cooked and dried, so I'll put this out of the way. So abracadabra, there's what it looks like dry. It's not got quite so much darks in here though, but I can get some more of those colors in. Okay.
Could you hold it up so we can see it? So we see it, no,
like
so we
you
see
did
the
before.
real.
Oh, sure, sorry. Yeah, there you go, so you can see the colors
Yeah,
a
the
little
colors
better.
are very different.
This one is, I went a bit further with my colors this time. So this, of course, though, dries about 20% lighter. So this looked extremely vivid when it was wet, just like this one. But the yellows have a fairly big drying shift. I don't use any cadmiums, but you can see the intensity. But if I show you that at the end, it will look much more like this one. I did get a little bit more brown in that one, I must admit. So, okay, next step. I have to clean palette. As I've got all of these jars, so I've got plenty of clean water. Because if you want to do nice clean paintings, clean color, you've got to have clean water. You can't paint with the sludge because it will neutralize your color. So I try not to have them mix too much and have them mix on the paper. It's much more exciting. Okay, so I'm just cleaning out my palette. And some of the colors stain. So I've got a little, where's my bucket for putting my dirty tissues? So you're probably wondering what that is doing stuck right in the middle. Well, that's my test color. And I'm going to need that for the abstraction. So I should probably get to doing the abstraction next. So let's back up a little bit. You've seen that, so I'm going to put that one away for just a jiffy, and we're going to bring in the abstraction. So I'm going to pretend that this is not halfway done, because it is partially. I just can't show you it all in every little step. But this is my design that I came up with to begin with, and it's already at this stage. So what I'm going to do is, while that one is drying, I said I'd do them simultaneously. I was thinking about my design plan here, and it's, I guess, somewhat forming a cruciform shape. So that's the other thing that I think about before I even get started. So this is how I was taught. So you have to pick a design format or structure. And these are all the ones that I'm comfortable with using. And if the light was on, I could actually show you which ones fit in which pattern. But this is what I had to learn way back when. And this is nailed in my head now. Line, value, color, texture, shape, size, direction. I can say it in my sleep.
Excuse me,
So-
Sally, do you want the front light on?
No, it's okay. It is a little dark, but I can manage. So what I did this is what I'm going to do for my realistic plan, and then the abstract plan, okay, here are the changes that I'm going to make. So we'll talk, they overlap somewhat, obviously. So we go through each of these elements of design. So thinking about what I've got here, underneath is going to have the sunflower overlaid, or is this overlaid on the sunflower? You can see it either way. So I had to decide, do I want to have a straight line or a curved line. Those are your choices. So I decided to go with a curved line. Then I went to my value and I had to decide what my value pattern was going to be. And here I wrote that it's going to be a piece of lighter value and darker value, which, where's those gone? Have they gone? Which is a piece of lighter value in darker value. That's this one right here. But it changed my mind. Prerogative. And I decided I would prefer this pattern, which is called all-over pattern, which has disconnected lights and darks. So then I did my value study, and you can see the sunflower, and I have to decide whether I want to bring this design forwards more, or whether I want to focus more on the flower, and I'll do that as I paint it. So I can't tell you exactly how it's going to turn out, because sometimes it tells me what it wants. So this one is disconnected. You can see that it's much more of a grid effect now, and that's what another name for this particular value pattern is. So then I chose color. I have to decide whether I want it warm or cool, and which color pattern. And my grid for this one, I decided to go with a double triad, or no, it's not quite a hexad. Hexad would be evenly spaced, but it's a double triad, so it's slightly warmer versus slightly cooler primary colors. So that will be the pattern for the abstraction. And I decided that I have to pick ahead of time because it helps, and that I'm going to choose probably a yellow-orange dominance over the whole painting. So I'll have that in my mind mulling through while I'm painting. So then I have to think about texture. Do I want it texture dominant or not? So I'm going to be showing you how I do texture in a second. But for it to be dominant, it has to be either 30% or 70%. 70% is obviously dominant. 30%, obviously it's not. So that means I'm going to have texture 70% on all the area on my painting for it to be dominant. So then I looked at shape. I picked that it would be a circle dominant. You've got circle, square, and triangle. And obviously I've got quite a lot of circles. And then even my squares that I've got in here for a little bit of contrast, I rounded off the corners so they're not quite squares, so it would have a little bit more organic. And then, of course, the flower underneath has lots of curves in it already, so I know I'm going to end up with a much more circle dominant. And then size is the next important, and small, medium, and large. So here's part of my big circle, which I literally drew like that, using my elbow as the pivot. There's going to be a circle over here. And obviously this is kind of forming an arrow, a direction. So it's creating some flow going on in the piece, which hopefully will become important. And the last bit is direction. So you've got, horizontal, vertical, or oblique, depending on. So I know that the flower has more of a radial effect because the flowers droop down that way. I'm kind of liking some of my horizontal. So it may end up being a design format that's got quite a lot of horizontals. I've kind of got that mulling in my mind simultaneously. So pretend that I have masked the whole thing, and some of the masking is now gone. There's a little bit still left on here, actually. And this was me taking off the mask off these little circles. And I did a nice big wash, just like we did with the yellow of the sunflowers. I did my reds, I did yellows, I did some blues, and then I waited for that to dry. I probably did wait overnight. And then the next day started to fill in a few of these shapes, and that's pretty much the beginning step, so now we're going to get into the next step. So I want to put texture in. So this is why I've got this silly template. Everything, why should I got these silly things? So. Okay, I'm going to you can't see my drawing, but I'm going to layer that over there, and we're going to do something fun. So this is where you can be a little bit spontaneous. So I've got some Halloween cloth. These are little spider webs. I don't know how well you can see those as spider webs. I'm going to put that under here. I tend to talk like a train, so if you've got any questions, please feel free to ask me. So I now have to get that in the spot that I want it. So I'm going to have a Halloween kind of a thing. So I've got watercolor, very small amount, I'm hoping that's enough, in a little misting bottle. Just checking it's working. And I'm literally going to mist through my template, and that's going to give me some texture. And I know that this is a line here, so when I cross it, I want it to be another color. So I'm going to pull this one off and hopefully not mess up where I was. Starting, and of course it's just drawing paper, so it's buckling horribly. And then I decided that I maybe put a little bit of warm orange. I'm remembering that as being my dominant color. Come on. Don't do this. There we go. So now I'm going to, also the little thingy is on the wrong side, so I'll twist it. There we go. I did these ahead of time. Come on. I might have to tip it to get it to work. Okay, not working. So, go to the next step. Does it work? You take a toothbrush and you get a nice lot of paint and a ruler, which I didn't remember. But I'll use the back of this, this will work. And I will spatter instead. And this is a template, so it's protecting everything. So I'm going to get a little bit of yellow in my blue, but that's okay. I want mostly the yellow in there. And then I want to do a little bit, I'll do a little bit of blue to emphasize that. Phthalo blue is wicked, wicked strong, so I'll be cautious with it. Got to clean off the toothbrush. And now I'll put a little bit of blue in here. And hopefully the spider webs will be apparent. And then there's a circle underneath here, and I will add some in there too. So let's move this out for a sec. And whoop, take off the thing. So it's very light. I wanted it to be light because remember, this is the lightest part of thinking about my value pattern too. So if I'd gone too dark there, then that wouldn't have worked. But that's just a suggestion of the seed effect. Okay, so I can let this one dry. Put that to one side for a sec, although I perhaps could even move to the next step on this one. Color-wise, I think I'm going to be very alternative, and my sunflower is going to have bright red or pink petals. I don't think that that exists in nature. And certainly doesn't have a blue middle, that's for sure. So already I'm using color abstractly, as you would not expect it. And you can see the colors through, and I really like that effect. And there is a circle here which I'm going to start pulling out. But I think I'm going to add a little bit, that's not 30% even, that's not even 10. Well, maybe it's 10. So let's shove in some other textures. Of course, get tangled up. I make these with hot glue. So I'm just going to put some on here. Okay, I've got that curve shape. Maybe I should kind of use that a little bit. This is a leaf. I know that there's a leaf here, so might as well use a little leaf. I got a baby leaf, so we want to also start thinking about some of the principles of design, and I have a list with all of them on, but they are unity, conflict, dominance, balance, alliteration, repetition, harmony, and gradation, but I'm not seeing my list now. It's gone. Everything goes walkies. Okay, well, I have a list. So I'm starting to think about now, that's repetition. So I've got also repetition now. Size is a big leaf, so let's put in a small leaf. And we've got some curly-whirly things happening there. So, I don't know, this is just a pattern here that or do I like that one? Or I've got another one here that I kind of like too. There's lots of curly-whirlies, or you can probably see that one a little bit better. Some curly-whirlies. Or, as it's Halloween, this is the stuff they drape over graves and things, you know, in the houses. It's very, very loose cheesecloth, and this works extremely well too. So maybe I should put that. And I'm thinking I've got to get up to that 70%. I'm about 50 right now, not working. So I've got to get that in. Oops. Where did that go? I need that. Now it's too dark for me to see it. Here it is. Got it. So I'm thinking yellow dominance, but that's going to be a little tough because that doesn't work very well. So we're probably going to have to change it to blue dominant, but that's okay. So I'm going to squirt through some of these just to get a flavor. Oftentimes I put these into wet washes and then the water and the pigment pool underneath and leave beautiful textures as well. But with the, with the short time that we have together, I don't think we're going to be able to manage to do that. So I'm just going to spray this. So it's probably, oh, she's out of water already. So this is how now you'll see how I load my paint. So I'm using green water. I'm using phthalo blue. I'm going to put some in here. Now the colors, some of the granulating ones will just block up your thingy straight away, so you wouldn't want to go with that. But what I do have and will use for this instance is I use the P.H. Martin's Hydrus ones. They're meant for dry brush, so they tend not to clog the thingy so much. Although phthalo blue is so transparent, it's not enough. That it doesn't generally do that. So we're definitely going to be doing much more of the blue dominance now. This is M. Graham phthalo blue. On one side at least, I know it is. The other side maybe De La Rani. I use quite a few English De La Rani colours too. So I can get some of these textures. I don't want to go too much, I just want it to be a hint. Okay, let's do this one's wonderful if you actually leave this on here and get it really wet. But I'm not with time. So I probably do need let's put a smidgen up here. Yeah, no, that's big. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I should repeat my Halloween thing. Yes, there we go. See, repetition, get it in there. All right. It's just a hint of it. Maybe a bit too much. So I don't want it to overtake that, so you can block back a little bit. And then it's just a very subtle amount of color. That may be too much. So I'm going to blot in little sections. So I've got light, medium, dark. So that's another contrast we can think about. Of course, you have to wash these off afterwards, but okay, so in the instance of getting these a little, okay, so I think we are getting to the point where this is 70% texture. I just don't want them to be too much. I want this sunflower to come out, at least somewhat. So I think we're good in terms of patterning, so let's put that one away and move back to, no, we haven't done that bit yet. Hold on, the right one. Yep. Okay, so now we're going to do texture on this one, but it's going to be not texture dominant. We're going to make it more smooth dominant. At least I think so at the moment. Stuff out the way. So what I want to do now is suggest the seeds. So I'm going to show you a technique I call scumbling. I really enjoy scumbling, but got to clean up the palette real fast. So scumbling is really scribble. Scribble with your brush. So I'm wanting to get into much more into my browns, into my reds, and then we'll do something a little bit more alternative. Even though this is meant to be realistic, I'll still put a little in there just for interest. So I'm going to put a little violet. Oh, let me show you my palette. I'm going to get a little violet. This is a mixture, made it up to save time. This is a mixture of Queen Rose and French Ultramarine Blue. For me, the jury's still out on Windsor Violet, whether it's light fast enough. Okay, I should start with the lightest color. So I'm going to start with my browns. Now I have to swap back to other photo. Everything does sprout legs here, I tell you. Okay, so this is now scumbling. Oh, she's got blue all over here. Watch me put blue all over this. Okay, so this is called scumbling. So it really is, you can really get into this. I am going to be careful around this particular little funky petal. And I'm gradually going to be building up lights and darks on the painting. Probably won't be able to show you the entire thing, but I'm thinking it's got to be a little lighter over here because there's reflected light there, so I don't want to get too dark over there. And it's got to get the shape. I'm going to look at my drawing where I am. So I have to think about a lot of things all at the same time. So for me, it's easy to lose track of time. And it's 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm still painting. I do that a lot. I think everybody knows that, that knows me already, that I'm a real night owl because, yeah, you can really get lost in doing this. You're not thinking about time and what time is it actually? How am I doing on time? Should I be marching along to do the... So I think you're getting a feel for how I'm doing this. I'm leaving little white spaces. But these are probably still too big, so I might come in and knock some of them back. I'm going to get some reds in now. I don't want to get too far away from realism because I'm doing abstract and realistic. This is supposed to be realistic. So maybe I'll smudge back to, I'll go to burnt umber, or I can add a little violet to it and that will neutralize it and make it much darker. So here we go, we're getting into the chocolate browns now. I would probably do that as a coat all over here first, but I'm in the sake of time. I don't think you're getting the feel of where this is going. So it really is scribble, and in fact, the more you can scribble, the better off you are, and your stroke becomes, part of the calligraphy of the actual piece. And we're just leaving those yellows behind. Don't want to go over this particular leaf here, so you probably can't see the line drawing, but I can. And just have to refer to my, wait a minute. No, this is the lid, that's not it. So I can come down here. And then as it starts to dry, I will go back in and dot in some darks, which will then bleed into, this is then painting wet in wet, because this is wet from the previous passage, and giving it dots, but I don't want to make it look like it's got the measles. So it has to be random. I want random consistency, if that makes any sense. So as I'm coming down here, I'm looking at my picture, I can see that this part is much darker, although I didn't make mine quite so proud. So I'm going to put a little bit of reds in here. And then in these little white spaces, I can come back and even add some other colors. Even though this is realistic, the violets are the close complement to the, well, they are complementary of the yellows, although the oranges not quite so much as the Windsor yellow that I'm using. So I'm going to stay in my drawing lines here. But I'm thinking of a gradation of texture. That's what I'm going for. And you have to work at a reasonable speed because you can see these are drying now. But I don't mind if they get a little bit of a bleed or something happening in there. That doesn't worry me quite so much because, you know, that's part of the nature of watercolor. But I am wanting to fill in more of the dots, if you like. So I don't want to spend, I really can't see the time. Can someone tell me how we're doing?
7:35.
7:42. Okay, so we've still got a little bit of time, so I can continue this a tad more. But then I want to show you how I would approach the leaves, because I'm going to have those build those colors up. And I like to do layering because the colors glow through, especially if you use transparent watercolors, which I like to. And then you get that glow because the light's going through those colors, bouncing off going through to the white of the paper and bouncing back into your eyes, which gives that glow, which is different from opaque, like gouache, for instance, which is opaque watercolor. The light bounces right off the paint then because it's got gypsum in it, fillers that make it opaque so that the light doesn't pass through to the bottom of to the paper underneath. And so it has a different quality. And I like the glow that you get with the transparent watercolors. So I'm thinking you're understanding that now. So I would probably even go much darker. It's not enough because I know that these dry lighter. So I have to now really get in some darks. So I'm mixing violet and burnt umber. And I'm going to get those, I'm thinking about the directionality now of some of these seeds to create some of that feel. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to fill it all the way out, but I think you're getting it, hopefully. And why not put a little bit of spatter in? Why not? I'm being very careful. This is my swish and flick, but I have to be careful that it stays where I want it. I should have put the template over. That would have been much better, wouldn't it? Oh well. So now I want to fill in some of these much lighter areas. And can really, I like this silver brush because it has a lovely point. And it's, you know, $20, it's affordable. And I've had this one about 8 years, so it's actually doing pretty well. And maybe longer than that, actually. I started off with the Windsor Series 7 way back in the day. And those were all splayed. They contain actually some sable, I think. They were a sable mix. This is black squirrel in here. So that's why I'm able to paint for so long, because this has got a lovely reservoir. It's holding lots of color. So I could even drop some salt on that and really get some textures going. So let's get to doing some leaves now. Okay. So I'm going to have a lot of incomplete paintings, but no problem. Need some greens now. And where's my color wheel going for this one? I've got to look at what greens I had chosen. So here we go. Put the yellow at the top. Just get rid of these browns. Okay, so now I'm going to move to mixing my greens. And one of my favorite combos is a warm yellow plus phthalo blue, which a lot of people don't like working with phthalo blue. They find that it, it's can be very dominant. It's just a case of getting comfortable with it. So I'm trying to make sap green. And of course you can buy sap green, so why mix it anyway? So here's my sap green, which I'm going to use. Pretty similar color. I don't know if you can, how well you can see that. So I can mix it quite adequately. And the sap green here is a mixture of quinacridone gold and phthalo green, which is very similar to Indian yellow, which is replacing the quinacridone gold because of the car industry. We don't have yellow cars anymore, so we're getting less and less quinacridone gold. So they're replacing it with that. And phthalo green and phthalo blue are fairly similar in terms of their pigments. So I'm wanting more of a, I'm looking at my thing here. I'll get it on top here. I'm wanting to get variations. These ones are tints going this way, getting lighter with water, and then those are slightly grayed. By adding, for me, I add the complement to get it to be gray. So I'm going to do, I don't want to put green in my yellow. I always try and take my lightest color first. So I take my yellow and then mix it with my green. Otherwise I'm going to end up with a nice green well. So now I'm going to be looking at my leaves, and I'll put that somewhere up here. I'm just going to look at this one for instance, and this may be a little bit too light. Yep, this. Usually I have a little swatch handy, and it could do with being maybe a tad brighter. So I'm going to swap to using the cooler yellow. So if you take a cooler yellow and the same blue, you're going to get a much, much brighter, I don't want to go in my yellow, much, much brighter. This is a little bit dulled, so I'm wanting a slightly more vibrant one. And I'm going to drop these colors in, following some of the patterns, but I don't want to drop them then homogenize them. I'm actually wanting to have the colors do some mixing and mingling. So I'm going to mix some other greens here as well. I like the French ultramarine blue with sap green. So I'm seeing that there are, I know it's going to dry lighter, so I have to think about all those factors. So I like things to mingle on the paper, but I didn't pre-wet this. So I'm working quickly so that the colors can mingle. But I'm trying to preserve the luminosity of that yellow coming through the leaf. Still got phthalo blue all over my hand. So trying to stay in my lines. Okay. So it goes into a little darker down there. Okay, and if I go outside a line and I'm not happy with it, I feel that this is a little bulbous here. Such a word. Yeah, I think it is. I'm blotting it back with a dry tissue, and hopefully it won't flood back in again. Sometimes you have to do it more than one time, depending on how wet the paper is underneath. This is dry paper, of course, because I did this earlier. So that's one leaf. Now this leaf here is a giant, a really big leaf. This one is part of, is a secondary. This one's a much bigger one. These leaves were dinner plate size, they're huge. So there's a lot of light on this one. So I'm going to get some slightly lighter colors to start with. So I'm just going to think tints now, so I'm adding water. This is very light here, maybe not light enough. So I'm getting some lights in there and start painting around the edge of these leaves, petals. Anybody got any questions? Dropping in some shadow shapes. That might be a little bit too green, so I'm dropping in a little bit of burnt sienna to knock it back so it's not quite so bright. And I need to just add more of the sap green. So this is a little bit more over here. And then this is called softening off. I've got a hard edge now, so if I just bring water up to it, it'll soften it away. And I need to look at where my leaf is. So I'm getting these interesting patterns going on. I don't know if you want me to zoom in so that you can really see what's happening. But up close, it's interesting, but from far away, it still reads as a cool green leaf. So that's what I'm always trying to go for, is something that looks interesting when you're looking at it, scrutinizing something from, a foot or so away, and then also thinking about what it would look like to read across a room. All these lovely things we artists have to think of. So I've just dropped in some of the complement, and then there's this beautiful shadow under here. That's this shape here. I think I'm going to pull into there as well. Quite a lot more oranges underneath because the light is bouncing around from the petals to the leaf below. So there's lots of light doing its thing. So I'm going to get in some greens and particularly this yellow-orange. Okay. And I've got to try and get this lovely shape in here, which is the cast shadow of the petals, but I can't do that at the moment because I really need to wait for that to be a little bit drier. Otherwise it's just going to bleed into it. So sometimes it's good to go and take that cup of coffee and savor the moment while you watch paint dry.
So Sally, how long does one of these, can it take a week or,
It all depends on how big I'm working. If I really get into the texture part, and sometimes I really get carried away with that, that can take me a good while, because I'll show you as we go on. I don't just do textures by spraying through. I'm going to be lifting some out too. And I like to do a bit of both. So depending, oftentimes I put them away for a while and I have to think about them and like, what does this painting need? So it's kind of hard to say exactly how long it takes, but what can I say? 27 years. That's how long I've been learning.
I actually think that's good for all of us to hear, that it's just something that you, as you say, the painting maybe has to speak to you.
Right.
When you're satisfied with it, and
Right, and then I put it in the mirror and look at it backwards, especially for the abstractions, because you only have the design elements and principles to work on. When you're doing a realistic piece, of course, you can think, okay, well, I don't have the color right or the values wrong or what have you. Then you know. So I am thinking values now as well. Oh, I guess I do think about quite a lot, but I'm just realizing how much I guess I do. And I'm thinking about value now, so I'm getting this a little darker and dropping those colors in. But I'll show you another little trick, because we can't close off the color in our eyes. So if you've got an iPhone, clean it up. I'm going to go to my camera, and this is just updated, so of course it is different than it used to be last week. So you used to click on the three little little circles. Now you've got to use this chart here. And it cuts out all the color so that you can see it in black and white. So you can see your values. So this is in mono. That's in now what they call silver tone. And that one is in noir. Oh, sorry. Yeah, wait, let me... I prefer mono. So I'm starting to work towards these values now. But of course there's no dark background in yet. That I've got to get to. So that's what I use, and the other way of doing it, and of course you might not have your phone with you or something, the next best thing is to squint, look like you're half blind, and look through your eyelashes, which is where you can filter out some of that color, so it's like twilight, where colors start to disappear and you see much more black and white. And of course it takes things out of focus a little bit, which is sometimes a good thing. Alternatively, you can use these old theatrical things. And if you have eyes that team together, I don't. But this was my son learning vision therapy, so a red lens and a green one, and you put them over and your eyes will blend them together and it makes a really deep, I suppose somewhere between brown and gray. And so for me, all I get is stripes. So it doesn't help me at all. But people who can enjoy this, it's very helpful. And they're just theatrical Plex things that they put over those lights in the theater. And so, you know, you can buy these. So depending on which works for you. So for those who can't eye-team, like me, I'm glad that iPhone now can switch off the colors. Uh-oh.
No, it's okay, it's on never, but I don't know. Sorry.
It died. Is it battery? No.
This happened last year.
All right. So,
It's magic.
do we want to go back? Yeah, let's let this one dry a little bit more. I can do a few more leaves, but I want to get some really rich, deep darks in here. And I know a lot of people are really afraid of rich, deep darks. So that's what's going to make this pop. So I'll show you the next version, my cooking show thing. So this is the same picture now dry, and it's, of course they did fill the whole of this space where the seeds are. And I did get that shadow in. Oh, I didn't do that leaf, but I did some of them. I haven't done them all. But you can see how the colors have bled out from the areas. I'm going dark here, so I know I'm going to cover them. It's not going to be a problem. But the next step is for me to take off the masking fluid. And you can use your fingers, but your fingers have got a lot of oils in them. So I prefer to use a rubber cement pickup, natural rubber pickup, and pick it off like this. And all I have now is beautiful white paper left behind. Now I might do another coat on here to get the colors to really pop in these petals. But I won't know if it really needs it until I've got my rich darks in. So that's the next step. So, and these are my frisket boogers, official name. Really? Well, that's what I was told them as. Maybe it's not official name. I just don't want to rub too hard and too fast because I don't like the smell of rubber at all. I hate the smell of rubber. So I've got a few up here. I think I might leave those. That will help me go in around these edges. But I wanted you to see the lovely whites. That's where the light is really catching the flower, the petals. You can see these very, very light areas. So once I get the darks in, hopefully all of this will start to pop. So let's go to the next step. So we're not going to have a complete painting, I'm afraid, but you're going to at least know how to do one if you want to have a try yourself. So I'm just cleaning my palette, and then we'll move to getting some rich, deep darks. And this I'll do wet in wet. And I'll probably end up putting in some salt, because that's fun. Little German individual salt shakers. I think my husband's mother gave me this one. So, literally we'll be adding condiments to my artwork. So, we need some really rich darks. And I'm looking back at the colors that I can use. So right now, where are we? We've got definitely this palette going on in here. I don't know if you can see a couple of reds I popped right in there. Even though this is supposed to be realistic, I had to put in a few. And now I have purples, blues, and reds that I can use to make my background. And looking at the, I'm looking at glasses, the background here looks extremely dark, but it actually was the cast shadow of a big tree that was nearby. I think I'm going to pop in a little bit of blue sky, because I like the blues against the oranges, because of course they're opposite each other on the color wheel and pop. So I'm going to start mixing up some colors now. I think I could use some fresh water. So, well, it probably doesn't matter for the deep darks actually. Okay, but having said we don't want to solid colors. Okay.
Do you ever do the same scene a few times to?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
few versions of it, I guess.
Actually, I should have brought all the different versions. There's one with an apple and a pear in the middle next to the left of the sunflower on the floor here. I've done that one about 5 different ways. So it's kind of fun to try that, to make it, to change just something here. And the effect is totally different. So that one is done with all smooth. Then I did it with all textures. I think I did like 90% texture, and so it was really dominant. Then I changed the color. Picked another part here, or I made it less geometric. I wish I didn't bring those with me, but I should have done. But yes, I do. I love to do things different ways. I find it hard to paint exactly the same thing twice. I don't think I'm ever able to make everything look perfect, each one exactly the same. But that's really good practice. I don't want to sneer at that, because you really get great consistency by doing the same picture over and over and over. Even though many of us don't want to do that, especially in the beginning. I hated the thought of doing that. Especially having learned abstraction, I always wanted to do something different. And now that I'm feeling much more comfortable with realism, I don't mind doing things a second time. In fact, I do quite a lot of demos, so in fact, over the course of the week, I might demonstrate something 4 or 5 times, and then I end up with quite a number, but they're all a little bit different. And so it all depends, I guess, on my mood as to how much paint I throw around, or which colors I'm wanting. So your emotional response to a piece, it does vary depending on, what's going on environmentally in the world or just in your personal life. It does affect how your painting comes out. And oftentimes the first time you do it is always the best. And then you try and repeat that and get that emotion in there that you had, passion the first time. And the second time it is, sometimes doesn't work so great. But by the time you've done it about the 4th time, you're thinking, oh, well, you know what, I like that bit, I'm going to do that again. So it all depends on, where you are in your development, I suppose, as to how much emotion you can put into your painting. In the very beginning, when you're learning, you just want to be able to copy. But once you start to be able to use, some of these things more comfortably, and to say, okay, I'm going to do totally different, let's see what happens. And I'm a definite experimenter. I get the science thingy, so that's the experiment coming in. What if I do this? What happens? And so that's why they don't always come out the same, because variety is the spice of life, right? Okay, so let's get some super deep darks going. I think I'm going to move to a bigger brush. I've got a flat brush here. This is a round. This one's probably that's going to be a bit clunky for a job. So let's use this one. So to get nice, rich, deep darks, and I may not be able to do it in one go, I might have to do it by glazing, so layers, and because they're transparent, you'll be able to see through them. So I'm needing to make concentrated color, but if you get too concentrated, it can look kind of dead too, especially if you use grays. So I'm trying not to use any grays, so I'm going to be using French ultramarine blue. Yeah, you can see me on there. And of course I've got a lot of background to do, so of course I want to lose a lot of paint. So So, okay, so there's some blue. Okay, what else have I got on my chart? Oops, it moved. Dial up my colours. That was Jane Jones's favourite thing. Dial up what you're going to do and stick to it. So I'm wanting violets. So I've got a violet here. Oops, it's not really, gotta get it wet. It's dried out. I put this out fresh and dried already. So that's a mixture of French ultramarine blue and permanent rose. And if you want to see I'm on the picture. Oh boy, it looks like indigo up there. I don't know if you can see it. So yeah, the colors are quite different on the telly. So okay, so let's get some permanent rose. I think I'm going to use some of my new color I'm playing with. This is a Queen Magenta, and the jury is out on that one as to how light fast it is. It looks almost like opera, but it's not got that BV10 in it, which is like a fugitive brightener that makes the opera rose and opera, however you say it, fugitive. So, okay, I'm not going to do an enormous amount. So I'm going to turn it upside down. And I'm going to work in some of these areas. Having said I'm going to use the flat, I'm going to use the round. But oftentimes I would wet in here, but I'm going to work quite fast so I don't have to do too much wetting. But I'm going to work in patches. So I'm going to start with, I'm thinking blue sky too. Yes. Don't want to get okay, I do need some greens too, because I'm thinking green trees. So I'm going to be working upside down. So hold on, let me just grab some greens. They're all dried out. I spritzed some at the beginning, but now they're all dry again. Okay, so as I'm working upside down, it helps me to have the picture upside down. So I'm thinking that I'm wanting some more blues over here for blue skies. So I'm going to take my French Ultra. Well, I think I'll cheat a bit and add a little bit of furlough. Okay. So I'm going to start over here, I think. And kind of trying to stay in my lines, but I'm keeping it juicy wet, and this is where the slope is actually helpful. So you can keep a wet front, if you like. So see this bead? I really want it actually to go in the other direction, so I'll leave it flat for right now, because I'm working upside down, of course. So I have a little bit of masking here, although in transport it looks like it got bumped. So I'll try to avoid that. But I'm varying my mixtures. Ooh, that's interesting that did that. It pushed away the violet, so I'm experimenting with a new color. Shouldn't really be doing that on the demo, but anyway. So, and I don't bother to wash my brush out in between colors. I'm literally going by patting it just on my tissue here, and then picking up the next color. They're so dark that it's not a big deal. So, slowly painting around my subject. And then I really want to get back to my abstract, which I know is waiting. So I'm thinking more now, I do want to think more blue-greens, just in case I've got, maybe there's a tree back here. So I want to put in a coniferous green, and I like to make that with burnt sienna and phthalo blue. I really do like phthalo blue, don't I? Huh? Even though a lot of people don't. See, there's my, can you see the color if I tip it? It's really a nice sort of coniferous green. I know that that's not in here, so I guess I'm doing a little bit of cheating, but I am thinking that perhaps this is a fir tree back here. And so I'm going to drop these colors now into the violets. And then you really see how dark you can get. This probably almost reads as black. So using the most staining colors, and the dark colors are on the bottom of the color wheel, so the blues, the purples, greens. All of those are going to give you the effect that you want. So I'm going back to pretending now we've got a little bit more blue sky. So let's It's going to be quite dark, so you know how the sky can look incredibly blue at this time of the year. And that's exactly what drew me to this photograph that I took at the Post Road, probably about 3 weeks ago. And so I'm trying to get some of those repeat some of those really intense blues. And of course I've got a little bit of yellow underneath, so that's proving a little bit challenging because blue and yellow are making green. So we'll just go walk up. So I'm varying a little bit from the actual picture here because these were shadows of trees. And down the bottom I would do purples and browns and a little bit less of the blues. So you can see these colors are mingling beautifully. So even though this is realistic, I still feel I have to put in some alternative colors. They're just, I don't know, just happens. But I guess that's part of my thing. So a bit more French Ultra. And I'm going what seems pretty dark, which may be reading as black, but I can always go darker. It's harder to go lighter once you've got too dark. So I'd rather err on the side of slightly too light and do a second layer. So I need to do, let's go back into greens now. And Edgar Whitney taught Joe Taylor, whose book I showed you, who taught Jane Jones, who taught me, that if you've got a wash, every time you've gone 1.5 inches or 2 inches, change something. Color, value, texture, hue, whatever. Because that's what makes it interesting, exciting.
Can I ask you to repeat that? So you said when you have a wash,
Yeah.
you're supposed to change it every 1.5 inches?
Yes, especially if you're doing something like this. If you're wanting to have, a completely beautiful graded sky, it's okay. But I would still do a sky that starts more blue-violet, and as it comes down to the horizon would be more bluish-green, and of course it's getting lighter as well. So I think about all of those things in the color. But then, of course, you might have some clouds, and then maybe, there's a lot of things that can change. But I do remember him teaching that, and so, again, it's that repetition with variation. That's a mantra that goes through my head a lot. Repetition. How can I repeat this, but make it a little bit different? So all the time I'm thinking of those things. So I'm going to let that incubate a little bit more, but I'm getting to the value that I'm wanting. And I can see that it's definitely drying. But I'm like, okay, I'm loving what's happening here. This violet, I don't know, you can't see, you have to come and see it after. Just some of this mingling of colors is just so beautiful. And only watercolor does that. I guess that's why I love this medium, although I do paint in other mediums too. So let's get back to the abstract.
Just so that you know, it's 8:15.
Okay, what time have I got till?
The library closes at 9, but I would take about 11 or
Okay.
8:40 or 8:30.
Okay. Thanks, I appreciate that. Because I always lose track of time.
Well, also, everybody got a chance to see all your other beautiful pieces that you brought.
Thank you, yeah, okay.
So you really only have like 22 minutes?
No pressure, right?
You wanted me here, I don't know why.
Okay. All right, so now I'm thinking much more alternative. So I got to go to my, where are those? Where's the black and white one? There it is. Okay, so now I'm changing gears again and thinking design. Not that I wasn't when I was doing the realistic one, but this is all you've got when you're really working with an abstract. You don't have, say, okay, that's not blue enough, because who says? You haven't got a picture to work from. However, oftentimes when I'm really not sure where I want to go, I do a quick mock-up on cheap paper with cheap paint, and this was kind of what came to me. So, I mean, this is very crude, of course, but it's just a map. So I kind of had in my head that I wanted to have red leaves, and I wanted some of these things to pop out a little bit more. Probably will make this one pop out, this circle here. And these squares look like splodges, and this hasn't got the texture underneath, but you can see the sort of very, very rough bones. It just helps me get it into my head where I'm going, because it's quite a lot to swap from one to the other. Usually I do either an abstract through to completion, or I do one of those. I don't usually do them right side by side like we're doing right now. Okay, so let's start putting in some. I've got to go back to my color wheel. That's for that one. And so I know I have to stay in there. So these are going to be the colors of my flower, of my petals. So I'm going to get some reds going. So I've got a combination of, I use a alizarin crimson hue, which is from Dale Rowley. It's primarily Peroline maroon, so it's one of the most light-fast of the alizarin crimsons, which have had a bad rap through history, because it was made from the madder plant, and that is fugitive. Any plant-based pigments are not light-fast. When you do your eggs at Easter, you know they don't keep the colors. Okay, so let's get some reds in here. Why not? So, okay, I've got a little bit of yellow underneath here, so that's kind of nice because this is a transparent color. I'm going to put a little bit of a different red in now. Just pull up my brush and pick up the next color. So this is the petal that's sort of coming down. So we'll get him in. And if it's puddling, I just pick it up with a thirsty brush. That's patting it dry and then it makes it thirsty. So, one very bright petal. So when I'm getting to the petals over here where the abstract drawing is, then I will change. So there's one petal here already. So I've got to the edge of the petal because there's the line of this big square here. So now I'm going to paint this one right here. And I've got texture underneath, so because it's transparent, you'll see all of that. But because I crossed this line, now I'm going from these colors to something a little bit cooler. So I've got repetition here from this color to this color, but something different here. So I'm looking contrast now. So I'm thinking about all of those 15 words echoing through my head. So I'm going to vary it a little bit and pop in a little bit of blue. And of course that's made it slightly more violet. So that's now a petal at the bottom part of the sunflower, but it has followed the abstraction line. So let's pick a couple more. It's hard to, I guess I should have done this all the way to this point and then configured it, finished it all to completion so that you could see how it would look, but I didn't get a moment. So I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit. I'm trying to get a feel for the distribution of the color. I'm thinking about, is this going to be too much red? So I can see that looks a little bit, so I'm going to drop in a slightly warmer. So there's a gradation of colors going on within each shape, which makes it even more interesting. And I could add some salt and make it, even more, have a little bit more texture. But I'm covering up quite a bit of this lovely light texture. So at the moment, I'm only in the light, I'm getting into mid-tones now. And it isn't until I get to the really rich, deep darks that this painting will start to come together. So I don't think I'm going to complete it in, what have I got, probably 10 minutes left.
No, you have.
So just tell me when I'm...
5 minutes is fine.
So I can't paint each shape one against the other because they'll bleed into each other. So I have to do this sort of tic-tac-toe game and bounce around. And this one is inside this shape. So I'm going to stop at the border here. So I added a little bit of blue, maybe a bit too much, because I'm also looking at values, although it looks like it's got to go quite dark. So I want to be in mid-tones, but I don't want to get into the super darks. So I'm just pulling that in there. And if you go outside the line like I did, grab this off the towel and blot and pulling this up. So now it's starting to look very abstract. At the moment you can't see sunflower really at all. But that's okay. So I'm sort of responding now to the painting a little bit too. Am I going to go for a red-violet dominance? And I probably am. So leaves are usually green. I'm going to do red ones. Why not? Who says you can't? There aren't any constraints when it comes to abstraction. It's whatever comes out of your head. So I'm going to, there's a circle in here, so I'm looking to see where the edge of that is. I want that one light, so I'm going to do this part here, dark. So I'm trying to stay inside my lines. So this is where, time just disappears. And you're busy doing your thing. And the world is going by. But did you see that I, even in this little shape here, which is barely 1.5 inches, it's got a warm from warm to cool. This one was light to dark. That one changed hue. So it's always about contrasts. And I guess that's what I like, or I'm drawn to. Okay, so I'm looking at my edge of my...
Is there any way after you finish this painting in the future you can post it so we can all see what it's going to look like?
Sure.
A little bit of pressure there.
It might take me a little bit of time, but sure,
Well, you'll be up until 4 tonight.
No, I got 2 classes to teach tomorrow.
No, I'll be expecting it tomorrow.
There's nothing like a deadline to get you to finish something, Really nothing like a deadline. So I'm neutralizing my paint now with green. And so it's graying it, but it's different than that in the blue over there. So again, repetition with variation. And I'm liking what's happening. But this leaf goes also outside. So I'm going to pull these colors down. And I don't know, let's put a little bit of, let's put a little yellow in there. Got to be careful, the yellow is opposite the violet. So I'm just going to drop it in and leave it alone. So if I meddle with that now, it's going to turn into grey, because yellow and violet make grey. So I'm just going to leave that one to be. That's right on the edge of that line over there.
Beautiful colors.
Can you tell I like this color? I just, there's something about magenta, or, well, it's really a cool red, but we call it hot pink. So, cool red, hot pink, I don't know how that happened, but don't ask me. So I'm just sort of dancing around a little bit. And because this is a reverse of the other one, that my petals were light, remember, and this was dark. Now I've got dark petals, so now where the lights are, I'm painting the darkest darks. So we're not thinking about sunshine in this at all. That's got nothing to do with it. For me now, it's all about color. So I'm going to get in. These are all mid-tones, and I don't know whether I'm going to have an opportunity to get to putting in the super deep darks. But maybe. So I've done enough of that color now. Let's change it a little bit. Get a little bit of darker, trying to stay inside my lines.
When you do post this, will it be on SallyMeddy.com?
Yes, probably, or if they want it on the website.
Oh, that's good. Any other one also?
Yeah.
Well, whenever.
When I'm on it. Okay, so I'm going a little bit warmer now. I'm kind of losing a bit where my drawing is. So I'm having to refer to my piece here, but I'm going to drop in some darks now. So let's get some. Am I allowed to do? Well, it might be a little bit out of my range. All right, let's put it in blue. I'm trying to stick to primary colors. Oops, she says going into the violet. Kind of working in the half light here, and blue and violet are very similar. So I'm going to drop in some of these colors. And that's how the light was coming through the petal on the yellow one up here. And so I'm emulating that by doing it wet and wet. But before this becomes a hard edge, I've got to finish this shape. But this one is wet, so I may have to leave a smudge of white. Official word, smudge. I don't know where smudge came from, but it's a small amount of something. I don't think it's an English word, it's just a made-up word. The smidgen, I think, is the official word. But I don't know, I kind of like smudge. So I think I'm just going to whip that up a little bit more. So we've got some interesting things going on. Okay, so I'm getting a feel now for where the petals are going to be, and I've made changes inside and outside the grid. I've got a line that's coming right through here. I don't want to lose sight of that one. So I could actually do a glaze all over here if I wanted to make it even more different. But I've already got these lovely colours mingled underneath, which you can't appreciate from there. They look very, very washed out. But actually there's a lot of colour in this. So I'm now going to do some of these squares. And then you'll say, okay, now she's thinking abstract. Yes, she really. So I'm getting in my mid-tones, and then the mid-tones you can take into the darks. I don't want to go too dark too soon, because it's hard to lighten it back into a mid-tone or a light if you get too dark. So it's better to step by step. All right, so what colours am I going to put down here? I only have black and white. I only have that, so I have to now, this is me now responding to what I've got. To what colours do I need over here? Probably need yellow, but of course yellow won't go dark. You know, you get to a value 2 or 3 of a 9-step scale. So yellow is going to not work. So I'm thinking I'm probably going to go with the blues. Why not? I like blue too. So just create a little space. So I'm going to use, pretty much I use these 6 colours. French ultramarine blue and phthalo blue green shade. And those are pretty much my only blues. Occasionally use indigo, but I find that a lot of them contain black and it can be flat, so I'd rather glaze 3 layers of blues to get to a rich deep dark and then go straight for the jugular and put in the darks, which can look flat, because they've got a lot more carbon in them. So here we go. I'm going to make my square. So I'm working wet on dry. But because I'm working fairly small, I can drop in other colours. So let's get some of those phthalos in here as well. So I'm trying to make a rounded square. And my drawing underneath is rather sketchy, so... Okay, I think I need a smudge of purple, violet. So I'm trying to make that into a nice shape. So read as a square, more of a rectangle, a bit more to... Don't ask me why I know why I needed a square, because this is a square. So again, it's that repetition with variation and size. So I'm following the rules of design. So if you follow them, essentially it should work. But it doesn't always. I haven't found that it always does. I'm dropping in a little bit of reds in here now, so it's making a slight violet. So I'll leave that one. So we're going to move to this square here, which is not going to be exactly the same size as that square, because that would be boring if they were all the same. Dum-dum-dum. And I'm making this one slightly bigger, and this one medium, and that one smaller. So it's actually forming an arrow. So anything that goes from wider to smaller forms a triangle. It directs the eye, so you get flow going on in your painting. You see that these are going from bigger to smaller, 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 smaller. And again, it pushes your eye up there. So this is going to push your eye this way now, and I want it to be similar but not the same. So let's go to no greens in this painting at all, except what happens by the mixing. So I'm going to stick with my blues, but I'm going to vary them a little bit. This one might be much lighter. And maybe we'll do a lot more of the phthalo, so it's got some slight lean to the green rather than the French ultramarine blue that leans more to the reds. So I'm going to make it the same as this one, and it looks like it's the same size, so I've got to go a bit bigger. I'll think about my design. So let's drop in a tiny bit of yellow, because that's part of my colour wheel. So I'm going to be ending up with, obviously, some greens. So I did wash my brush out so I don't make my paints dirty. So let's get a little bit of greens in here. And my square is, not perfect. And if I really want to get a very, very accurate shape, I might mask around the edge, because I can really take my time doing that. So let's drop in a few yellows. Okay, so I'll see that this angle isn't quite right. Curved edge. I'm probably running out of time.
No, you're good. You've got another 12 minutes. Actually, the library closes at 9, but I thought if you wanted to wind it up like a 8:45, then people could come up and take a look.
Yes, with the lights on so
they
they
can
can...
ask you questions.
Yes, absolutely.
But you're all good.
Yeah, feel free to ask me any questions, because I can't do a lot of multitasking, but I can talk and paint. So if you've got a question that you're burning to ask, please do. So this one is now more purpley. So
How can we sign up for your classes if we wanted to take one of your classes?
there's a little sheet over there with all the classes that are currently about to start, or have one of them just started already. And the information for how to sign up is on those. So,
Do you do private classes also?
yes, I do at my house, and then I'm not sure if my phone number is on there. But you can email me, I know my email is on there, adding a little blue here now. So just because that one was getting to the point where it was damp and not juicy wet, when it's too wet, the colours just mingle too much. So it's oftentimes a waiting game, and I wanted to have a dark leader that helps with directionality. So dark to light. Obviously this is a reversal, but again, I didn't want to do the dark here because I don't want your eye to go out of the picture. I don't want, you to be looking at Joe blocks over here painting. I want your eye to stay here and travel through. So I'm trying to use all my knowledge to make it work. So, okay, let's get some, and these are only the midtones. We haven't got even into the darks yet. And I can't put the darks in yet because we haven't got these dry, unless I grab the hairdryer, but as we're down to 12 minutes, I think I'm not going to be able to do that part. So I've got reds over here, now I need to think about some reds over here. So I'm going to put it in a red circle now, why not? This chair is not good. So let me think whether I do a light red. So I don't want to do a dark one here and go lighter because that will have a reverse flow. I need to do this one darker and gradually getting lighter. It helps with the flow. So light to dark does direct your eye. I don't know why it does, but it just does. So I'm going to go back to my pinks and reds, cool reds. Not hot pink, cool red. And I'm just doing a mixture. So I'm thinking mid-tone here, but I see on my thing here that I've got this pretty dark. So with abstraction, this is where you can break the rules. But am I going to do a whole circle? I'm going to do, see I've got a line that's going through here as well. And I'm going to, so this is where you have to start making decisions. So I'm like, okay, let's take a quick look. What did I do? Okay, I went darker there. So I'm not following this exactly, am I? Nope. Not at all. I'm going to do this half of a circle up here. And stay inside this line as best I can manage. Oops. Not staying in that line well enough. Too much paint on my brush. So that looks a little okay. So we want to make it point somewhere. So I'm going to put some darks up top. So your eye is just going to go that way, just because of the darks. Okay. So I'm feeling I need some yellows down here, even though I'm deviating from my picture. I'm just feeling that there's yellow here, here, and here. I feel it needs to be here, but it may not be able to get dark enough, so it may end up being green. But it may still be yellow underneath. So I've got this lovely texture going on, but I'm not even worried about texture. That's just going to glow right through. So I'm going to put in my yellow. This is the warm, my egg yolk yellow, Indian yellow, PY 110 if you're wondering which one. I hate the names of all the paints. They're just so unhelpful. Bumblebee yellow doesn't really tell you, you buy bumblebee yellow from Cheap Joe's and then you buy Windsor yellow from Windsor and you end up with the same thing. So I'm going to have a little bit of pink because that's a little darker value, but I can still see through that. So that's called charging when you drop those other colours in. And I don't want to mix it too much. I'd rather, even rock the painting around to mix the colours. But the water does the work. So I'm like, okay, go for it. I can have my cup of coffee. Actually, I don't like tea or coffee. I'm really weird for it. I don't like tea. So I'm getting those going in now. I'm feeling that. No, I'm thinking that one needs to be blue. So, I had a yellow there though. Oh, really I shouldn't use it. We're going to end up with a green painting because we're going to be changing it afterwards. Okay, so there's a leaf here. So maybe I should paint that leaf. But this is it's cutting through this shape. So, if I did the whole circle, then that would push the image back. And at the moment, I'm not sure how much sunflower I want there to show. So I have to decide which is, again, it's that contrast or dominance. Is it dominantly abstract or is it going to be dominantly realistic? And then if it becomes halfway in between, then it's called semi-abstract. And I guess that's the area I like to be the most. Although there are a couple of things here that have just no, then it's called non-objective. There's no anything that you can recognize. And so I'm, again, yes, it's my mood. Depends on what I'm feeling as to, well, that one's kind of like a nice little smile in the middle of my painting. So I'm going to have red there, I've got yellow here, I'll put a little bit of red over here. So only the oranges and greens are going to be really absent, except those that happen to mix for me. So we've got to think about what's my mother color, which is going to be the most dominant, the 70% of the painting. And at the moment, it's equally balanced between the yellow, the red, and the blue. But I'm only at the very lightest stages. So it could go any way. I oftentimes err on deciding which way it's going to go and leave it to the last minute. Is it curved dominant? Is it straight dominant? I've got to think about that. So let's get got textures in there, and you can see these textures right through these shapes. I like this shape here, so I am thinking that I'll turn it. I don't know how well I can do that. I'm going to get some yellows up in here. Am I in the picture? Yeah. So I'm going to, that's a dirty yellow. Got too much violet in my brush. So that's why I have all of these. You can see I like yogurt. Trader Joe's Greek yogurt, so I got masses of these. So I like to have, clean water handy. So I'm going to do this fairly light, and then I'll go over the top. So this will be a light mid-tone. And it may stay fairly light, we'll see. I'm trying to follow my plan here. Okay. So I've gone a long distance now. I probably need to add something else. So I guess we'll add a little bit of red, just a little, because I think red is going to be my dominant color. So I normally am wet on these, wet the shape and then do it. But in the sake of time, it's just easier to do it wet on dry and keep this front, this edge wet. So there's the edge of my shape. So the sunflower is really not that apparent, is it? It looks like all of these disconnected colors. But it all comes together. It just, yeah. I guess it can go any direction at this point, but I have to have faith that it will come out. Mostly they do, especially if I take the time to plan. It's when I don't plan, then they don't usually work. But sometimes I do like to do something completely spontaneous, and about 3 out of 10 times they do work. That's not very high odds, though, is it? So I probably would now start to think about putting in another color down here. I want these little pieces of the bottom of the leaves here to show. So I'm going to do a little bit of, let's do some yellows. Well, it's actually more like red now.
Sally.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
sorry. I'm the last color and then.
Okay.
You've got till 9 o'clock, but I'm sure if these folks want to.
Yeah. Okay, so if you want to put the big lights on, and you can ask me questions, and I'll answer them to my best knowledge. So now you'll be able to see that the colors are a bit better. It was really quite dull. So there's the other one. We were working kind of a little dark, I think. But this one is probably going to go, it's probably going to be a house for this one. So I can have them on the side of my, whatever, in my house until somebody likes them and buys them, whatever. So I'm going to try and be professional. I've got a mat. I'm going to put the mat with the painting, and that gets rid of the crud. around the edges so it looks better. So you're welcome to come up and take a peek. And I'll put them all up here. And any questions? I'm all ears. Look at these gorgeous colors happening in
That's
here.
beautiful. You couldn't see the pinks and the turquoises.
I know.
No, but now I can. It's nice to see that.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you...